What's up, Taiwan? I'm Yvonne Young with news from here in Taiwan and around the world. The UN General Assembly debate has just wrapped up, and like most years, many of Taiwan's diplomatic allies have used their speeches to advocate for Taiwan's inclusion in the UN. Cadence Coranta reports.
This year's United Nations General Assembly debate has come to a close. For Taiwan, the meeting is an annual reminder of its exclusion from the organization. It's also a time when Taiwan ramps up its campaign to be allowed to participate. Every year, many of Taiwan's remaining diplomatic allies also find ways to speak out about Taiwan's exclusion during the debate. This year, at least 9 of its 12 allies spoke in support of Taiwan, with several focusing on Taiwan's participation in UN agencies.
Excluding Taiwan from agencies where it can and must contribute, such as the World Health Organization and the International Civil Aviation Organization, undermines global capacity for collective problem solving.
Others focused on calling out what they say is China's distortion of UN Resolution 2758, a motion passed in 1971 removing the Republic of China, which is Taiwan's official name, from the UN seat representing China and giving it instead to the People's Republic of China in Beijing. China uses that resolution to justify its broader claims to Taiwan. But Taiwan and its allies stress the resolution does not prevent Taiwan's participation in international organizations.
Tuvalu holds the strong view that the UNGA Resolution 2758 does not preclude Taiwan's meaningful participation in the UN system. And Tuvalu calls for the admission of Taiwan as a member of the United Nations and its specialized agency.
9 of Taiwan's diplomatic allies also wrote a letter to the United Nations Secretary General calling for Taiwan's participation in the UN. Taiwan's foreign minister, Lin Jialong, also showed up on the sidelines, meeting with at least one diplomatic ally, Palawan President Serangoon Whips Jr., in what is the first known time a Taiwanese foreign minister has been in New York during the General Assembly debate week. As Taiwan's campaign for inclusion continues, despite the odds, Taiwan's allies return to the UN stage each year, determined to keep its voice and calls for recognition alive. John Su and Cadence Coranta for TaiwanPlus.
Foreign Minister Lin Jialong says it's time for Europe to stand with Taiwan against authoritarianism. That came during an address at the Warsaw Security Forum in Poland.
And today, authoritarian regimes, many China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea, have formed an axis of upheaval to challenge the rule-based international order. And China is largely seen as the decisive enabler behind Russia's invasion of Ukraine. As a result, democracies around the world must act in concert to counter the existential and systemic threat.
Parts of Central and Eastern Europe have grown sympathetic to Taiwan since Russia's 2022 invasion of Ukraine, despite formally recognizing China. This is Lin's second time in Europe this month. Both visits brought protests from China, which claims Taiwan as part of its territory and has threatened to take it by force. An active military officer also joined the foreign minister at a forum. The leader of Saxony in Germany is urging deeper chip cooperation with Taiwan as it becomes the first head of a German state to visit the country.
We all want to work together to face the great challenges of our time, protecting the climate, combating major diseases, and digitalization. And doing this requires the collaboration of bright minds.
Kretschmer was speaking at a Taipei conference on sustainability in the semiconductor industry. Also present was the president of ESMC, that's the joint venture in Saxony's capital Dresden between Taiwan's chip giant TSMC and German firms Bosch, Infineon, and NXP. The venture broke ground on a nearly $12 billion fab last year. It's expected to begin operation in late 2027, producing mature nodes at 12 nanometers and above. Taiwan and Saxony also agreed to expand talent exchange programs in the tech sector. From furniture to prescription drugs, the United States is putting a fresh round of tariffs on goods from Taiwan. Now, some are quitting the U.S. market while others seek to adapt. John Van Trieste reports.
This furniture store in the central Taiwan city of Taichung has given up on the U.S. It's seen income drop 80% due to Trump administration tariffs. And with an extra 30% tariff on soft furniture coming October 1st, the owners have decided the U.S. market just isn't worth it anymore.
不合成本了，所以说我们就喊卡了。所以说很多的传统行业也是一样，包括我们做外销的，我们还是一直在转国内的一个订单。
Taiwan's government has been working to support industries affected by the U.S.'s 20% tariff on Taiwanese goods. But the country's International Trade Administration did not respond to TaiwanPlus's request for comment on these new tariffs. But furniture makers and Taiwanese exporters overall are not the only ones who will feel the burn from new duties. There will also be a 25% tariff on heavy vehicles, a 50% tariff on kitchen cabinets and bathroom vanities, and a 100% tariff on patented drugs made by companies that don't produce in the U.S. Some economists think specific countries like Japan, Singapore, and India could try to reach a deal with the U.S. to ease some of the pain on their medicine makers. There's also a view that industry will adapt, with supply chains spreading out to countries subject to lower overall U.S. tariffs.
No matter where you move, then the tariff will be the same. But I think but companies will naturally assume, for example, some countries are safer than others. For example, Singapore, which doesn't have a trade surplus with the United States, will subject to lower tariff moving forward. So I think the idea is to diversify supply chain rather than permanently moving the facilities elsewhere. So I guess So, for example, the Chinese manufactured furniture will perhaps looking at different options, for example, Cambodia, Malaysia, and Indonesia.
But U.S. tariffs may not end here. U.S. President Donald Trump says he wants to move from taxing physical goods to cultural imports. He's repeated a call he made earlier in May to put a 100% tariff on movies made outside the U.S. It's unclear how that would work or what legal authority Trump has to go ahead with the policy. If the idea were workable, it would upend Hollywood's often cross-border production model. But in the industry, at least, it seems the idea isn't yet causing too much worry.
Until it becomes more substantive than just a tweet, it's sort of hard to have anything to react to. You know, there could be a proclamation at some point, there could be a Federal Register at some point, notice, you know, and then you would get a little more meat on the bones in terms of, okay, this is what we can react to. And obviously anything they did would, you know, there would be a lawsuit saying that this is an illegal infringement on, you know, free speech and so on. But until there's actually some substance to react to, it's sort of hard to even take it that seriously, although you do have to certainly pay attention to it.
Even if unworkable, the idea of a tax on foreign-made films shows that even over half a year into the second Trump administration, questions about U.S. trade policy may not be settled soon. Luffy Li and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
A U.S. official is visiting Taiwan on a trade mission to discuss agricultural exchanges. Under Secretary of Agriculture Luke Lindbergh will meet with government officials and leaders from Taiwan's meat and dairy industries. He is set to sign a memorandum of understanding with Taiwan's Dairy Association. Taiwan is currently trying to lower Washington's 20% tariff on most Taiwanese goods. The U.S. is Taiwan's top foreign supplier of agricultural products, including a majority of its beef imports. A recent U.S. military intelligence report has revealed that China is rapidly expanding its commercial ferry fleet as part of preparations for a potential invasion of Taiwan. The report, first laid out by the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, says that large Chinese ocean-going ferries have been modified to transport tanks and participate in amphibious operations. In 2022 alone, around 30 Chinese ferries took part in military exercises with China's People's Liberation Army. Taiwanese officials say they see the vessels as evidence of China's expansionist intentions toward Taiwan. And to find out more about China's gray zone warfare and its military capabilities, our reporter Alan Liu spoke to Guillermo Lailari from the Institute for National Defense and Security Research.
The report says that China has been expanding its commercial ferry fleet to better prepare for a potential Taiwan invasion. In your view, how effective have these non-military actions to pressure Taiwan been?
I believe that China's non-military pressure tactics on Taiwan have yielded mixed results, successfully normalizing its presence, but failing to significantly alter Taiwanese public opinion or weaken Taiwan's resolve. If China were to use civilian ferries for military purposes, which is the focus of your question, it would have significant implications under international law, particularly the law of armed conflict, also known as international humanitarian law. This strategy intentionally blurs the line between civilian and military assets, which is a foundational principle of the law of war. They're not supposed to do that. So when does a civilian vessel become a military target? Under the principle of distinction in international law, parties to a conflict must always differentiate between combatants and non-combatants, and between military objectives and civilian objects. Civilian ferries are normally protected objects. However, this protection is conditional. A civilian vessel loses its protected status and becomes a lawful military target if it makes an effective contribution to military action. So some examples that would cause a vessel to lose its protection include transporting troops and military equipment, which is what we think is happening, or laying mines, gathering intelligence, assisting in a military blockade. When a civilian vessel performs these kinds of functions, military function, it can be targeted and captured.
Taiwan's Coast Guard over the weekend reported that 2 Chinese research vessels had illegally entered its water, which suggests an uptick in gray zone activities from China. How do you think Taiwan can better respond?
First of all, it can increase its technological upgrades for maritime surveillance. Second, Taiwan needs to develop a legal strategy, much like the Philippines is to document the infractions that China is doing against Taiwan. Taiwan's allies need to come in and say, yes, China is doing this, it's wrong. They need to mount a campaign. Besides all these other things, Taiwan needs to integrate its Coast Guard with its military, with a lot of things so that they work in harmony against Chinese infractions.
With all these happening, the Washington Post also reported that Russia has been helping China bolster its air defense capabilities, with China bolstering both its air and naval power. What are some of the major lessons Taiwan can draw from these developments?
What China is doing now is developing what we call in the military courses of action. These are ways that a country would pursue a war using different forces. What Taiwan needs to do is bolster not only its conventional defense capabilities, what it's doing every day and pushing back on the PLA and the Coast Guard, but also it needs to bolster its asymmetric capabilities. Also, Taiwan needs to enhance its air and missile defense, because when those airborne troops show up, they're going to try to take a port or airport. Taiwan needs to harden its critical infrastructure to protect it from being attacked that way.
That was Guillemont Lailari from INDSR. A week after a dam overflowed and flooded parts of Hualien, officials say they've made progress on recovery. The state-run water company says the water supply is now back to normal and it has paused water bills for affected households. The Economy Ministry says it's finished work to divert the river that overflowed and has repaired levees. They're also working on a temporary river crossing to ease traffic on the only road being used for disaster relief. Officials are on high alert for the dam as it still holds nearly 6 million tons of water. As of Tuesday evening, 18 people are confirmed dead and 6 remain missing. Thank you for watching What's Up Taiwan. You can visit the TaiwanPlus website or follow our social media for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. Finally, we take you to Brazil, where skateboard legend Sandro Dias shattered 2 Guinness World Records with a jaw-dropping descent from a 22-story tower. I'm Yvonne Yang. Take care and see you next time.